I'm going to introduce Sohaila Digby, who's everybody's favorite registered dietitian. We learned so much from Sohaila, so y'all enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Okay, so how many of you here were with me on the first week that we opened up together? All right, and where are some of your friends? Do you have good excuses for some of your team members, doctor's notes, etc.? I know it's really cold and wet, and most people probably don't want to come out, but remember that if you know somebody who missed tonight's team lead seminar, there are other opportunities during the week, and you can check your handbook for those locations and times. So hopefully you'll get the chance to get the information to your team so they can do well like you are. But congratulations to you all for making it out on a cold night. It's not snowing this week. So today, we are going to learn about food. Who likes to talk about food? Okay? So first of all, I want to see if you guys are learning some things. Okay, so first of all, what food group should cover about half of your plate?
Vegetables.
Very good. Like peas, corn, and potatoes?
No.
Spinach.
Okay, like spinach, broccoli, cucumbers, green beans, non-starchy veggies. That's right. Can you eat those evil foods like corn and potatoes? Are they really evil?
Yeah.
They're really not that evil. They just have to share space on a quarter of your plate with your other starches. So they can still fit, they just don't get to have the big mound across most of your plate, okay? True or false, drinking water makes you lose weight. Some of these are kind of tricky.
No.
Okay. It's false because water doesn't have any weight loss properties in it, okay? But it does make your metabolism work more efficiently. So if you're dehydrated, you're not going to exercise well, you're not going to burn calories as efficiently during the day. So if you drink water, then you are going to do better. But water in and of itself doesn't have a weight loss capacity by itself. Does that make sense? So if you're well hydrated and you add water, that might not make a big difference. Just like a lot of vitamins and minerals. Some people say, oh, I get so much energy when I take B vitamins. That's because they were deficient. I don't get any energy when I take B vitamins because I'm already having enough. So it really depends on where you are before you start, okay? So drinking water can make you lose weight for sure, and it does for a lot of people, especially if they trade it in for what they were drinking, okay? Because you still have to be hydrated, and a lot of people hydrating themselves with liquid sugar. Okay, what three food groups are good choices for snacks? And if you were here 2 weeks ago, I had specific 3 things that I call a strong snack that I like you to pair together. Okay, a dairy or a non-dairy alternative. It doesn't have to be a cow milk product, okay? Like yogurt, someone said.
Whole grains.
Okay, and nuts would be a fat. So one of those columns was fat. Okay, a healthy fat.
Protein.
Fruit. So you want to get your protein from the dairy source. Now, what if your non-dairy alternative is rice milk or almond milk? Are you getting any protein in that snack? No, so I'm not against those milks, but they don't have protein, so they don't hold me long enough, so I can't use them for my strong snack. I have to use them as a part of something else that already has protein in it. Does that make sense? So if you have that combination, and it's not a magic combination, but it does a body good. So it gives you strength and energy to complete your workouts, to have a good metabolism during the day and burn fuel efficiently, and it helps hold you over gracefully so that when you get to dinner, you're not starving and willing to eat bags and bags of foods you don't even like, which is what happens a lot of times when people get too hungry. Okay, but other things can be a snack, but I prefer things that are sort of hearty to be a snack, almost dinner spoilers, if you will, not just little wimpy bits of something so that you eat a huge pile at dinner, but something that gives you good energy between lunch and dinner, and even between breakfast and lunch if you have a long stretch. So I'm really nice about snacks. I give people snacks, but they're just not vending machine snacks. So just remember, my definition of snacks might be different than yours. Okay, true or false? Most people who are trying to lose weight need to eat more protein.
True.
That's sort of another trick question too, because it depends on where you start from, okay? Because if you're not having enough protein, then you probably aren't going to hold over nicely from one meal to the next, because it does give you that staying power. So if you're having skim milk and Cheerios for breakfast and you're hungry in 2 hours, that's because there wasn't very much protein in your meal, or fat for that matter on that breakfast. It's a healthy breakfast, but it's not enough to get you very far. So what happens in 2 hours when you walk by the donuts at work? You eat 2 donuts and you're still so proud of your breakfast, which in the end I'm not so proud of that breakfast because it sets you up for failure, even though it was a good start. So it just needed something else added to it. It probably needed protein and fat in that breakfast instance. Okay, or just having protein. If you already have plenty of protein in your diet, then adding more protein is just gonna add more calories. I remember in the late 90s, I was working at University Hospital in a clinical setting, and that's when Atkins diet had its, second big explosion of everybody buying the books, and all of a sudden, everybody in the hospital cafeteria were buying 2 pieces of meat. So their plate looked the same as it did yesterday, but now it had 2 pieces of meat. So tell me what you think happened. You gain weight because you don't double the protein, you exchange the protein for something you may have been having if you weren't having enough. But if you were already having a whole chicken breast, then having 2 chicken breasts gives you 150 extra calories to store wherever you store it. Okay? So having excess protein, if you didn't need it, puts it into that overflow category. If you were here a couple weeks ago, whenever I said that, I'll smack that big glob of fat to remind you that anytime I have something excess, even if it's good for us, it overflows into what we call adipose tissue, which stays and keeps us warm, but otherwise doesn't do us any favors, okay? Most people who are trying to lose weight might need more protein, but not everybody. If you're one of those people who eats a can of soup for lunch, you probably do need more protein because you'll have probably a quarter of an ounce, a half an ounce of meat mixed into that can. Or if you eat like a piece of turkey on a deli sandwich, it might not be enough turkey, that might not be enough meat. So it might be, but it might not be everybody. How many days a week on average do you need to exercise to lose weight and keep it off, and about how long each day? Who made it to the exercise seminar last week to reschedule? Okay, let's let one of those answer, because I know y'all know. Okay. Very good. And another way some people say it is most days of the week, so that's 4 to 6 as a range, but about 5, 4 to 6. Now, some people are like, oh my gosh, that's impossible, I can barely do this and that. Remember that it doesn't have to be in 30-minute bouts. It can be in 10-minute bouts. So sometimes 10 minutes before you take a shower in the morning, or 20 is all you have to squeeze in the morning, and then you can do it a good 10-minute brisk walk on a lunch break, and then maybe after work even. So if you can't get all 30 at once, do what you can in those 10s, because the research does show those are effective. Now, there is one caveat. If you tend to perspire a lot, so that you have a very wimpy 10 minutes, then you might be one of those people that needs to cluster it back to 30, because you don't want your 10 to be so slight that, if you're at work, you don't want to really walk during your walking break. So be careful to not do that if you're not going to work hard, because you want to work hard during your 30 minutes to make the most of it. And one thing I like to say is 30 plus, because 30 is your hard exercise, but the rest of that needs to be moving, right? So I always say this little phrase that says, don't just stand there, move it. So whenever you're folding laundry, could you turn on some music? Would it cause you to wiggle just a little bit? It usually does for most people. Or could you, if you're standing at the park watching children play, could you engage with them a little more physically? Or if you're somewhere where there's a place, watching a sporting event for your child where there's a track around, could you get there 10 minutes early and take advantage of that track instead of sitting in your car waiting while they warm up or whatever it is. So don't just sit there or stand there, move it, move it. So you want to think about what you're doing that you could be doing and burning a few more calories. And not to extremes, you don't want to feel like you have to move every second or you're not going to lose weight, but to just make the most of that. All right, which foods can you eat as much as you want of and not gain any weight? Okay, and non-starchy vegetables are the foods that if you're still hungry after a meal, that would be what I suggest you have for seconds, because that helps fill you up at about 25 calories a serving. And who remembers what a serving is? When in doubt, you say half a cup, right? If it's cooked or chopped, it's actually a whole cup. Okay, so, but I don't need to believe that those aren't going to make you gain weight at all, because they don't usually, but if they're in excess of the calories that you can spend, then they have to be stored because your body can't do anything else with them. So realize, if you just keep putting more on your plate, even 25 calories plus 25 calories, that's 50 at lunch and then 50 at dinner, it will add up. So those aren't completely unlimited, but they are what you need to fill up on if you're still hungry after you've had your other portions. Okay, so do you hear what I'm saying? Nothing's really all or nothing. It's all about moderation. You can't just drink all water and hope it does this, and go with all non-starchy veggies and hope it does this. You have to do the combination of those foods. Okay, what in food contributes to weight gain the most? A, sodium, B, carbohydrates, C, dye, or D, fat?
Sodium.
Nobody said it yet. Fat. It's fat. Okay. D is fat. For every gram of fat, you get 9 calories. For every gram of carb, you get 4. And for every gram of protein, you get 4. So you get more than twice as much for each gram of fat. Okay? So a gram of fat is 9 calories, and a gram of protein and carb are 4. So that just says if you add an extra gram of fat, you're adding about 10 calories, or you're adding about half of that if you add an extra gram of protein or carb. Now, what food do we eat most likely in excess? Carbohydrates. That's the thing we tend to overdo, whether it's drinks, desserts, second piece of bread, second biscuit, second serving of mashed potatoes, whatever it is. So those could contribute the most if you're a big carb eater. But in actuality, calories per calories, it's actually fat. So if you tend to fry your food, or every time you eat food, your lips get kind of slimy, like you just put on lip gloss or chapstick and then you didn't, okay, that's probably because you're eating greasier food. If you have to use multiple napkins, that should put me on your shoulder saying, that's what I mean about the multiple napkins, okay? So hopefully I'll have a little angel on your shoulder reminding you. What is the appropriate serving size for a starch? Who knows? Half a cup. When in doubt, you can say half a cup. Okay, what about juice?
Quarter of a cup.
Okay? It is, it's about a half a cup, quarter of a cup is a good choice too. What about meat? About the size of your palm, which is about how many ounces? 3. About 3 to 4, that's right. And if you're very petite and fairly inactive, you don't need quite that much. And then what about butter? Okay? A teaspoon is a fat serving, and at each meal you do need a fat. But a lot of times the food that we eat already comes with the fat, so we don't have to add it. But if we don't have any fat, like if you're having a turkey sandwich for lunch with pretzels and carrot sticks, that is a fat-free meal, and it will not hold you like it would if you added just a little bit of fat, which you need. So it's just a teaspoon, and you don't need to, it doesn't need to be butter. It can be mayonnaise, it can be butter, it can be a dressing, it can be Smart Balance Light, which is one of the ones I like. It can be peanut butter, nuts, avocado, any of those healthier fats are even more preferable. But every meal does need to have a little bit of fat. It's when it has too much fat or too much carb or too much of any of those things that it gets us into trouble. Okay? So those serving sizes do matter. And if you haven't ever measured yet, haven't ever taken a few days to measure to really know what it is you're putting on your plate, go ahead and do that. And go ahead while you're doing that and put it into an electronic device that tells you exactly how much you're getting in. And I recommend supertracker.usda.gov, and that's in the handout somewhere, in one of the handouts. I think it's in your first one, but I'll spell it again if you want. I'll say it again. supertracker.usda.gov. And also MyFitnessPal is a great one that people really love because it's free on your phone. It's an app. The only thing that's a little bit more advantageous about the SuperTracker, which is a little less user-friendly, I believe, but it's a little bit, it's definitely more accurate because all of the food that's entered in there has been checked by somebody who works for USDA, whereas MyFitnessPal, I can just go in and say, my Cheerios are 50 calories. And then you might choose that, and they're actually not 50 calories. Okay, so just keep in mind you need to check for accuracy on MyFitnessPal. Raise your hand if you visualize yourself at your goal weight. Do you have a picture? Picture that? Okay, that helps people. Maybe even put a picture on your fridge so that you can be visualizing where you're headed. Right in front of the favorite food, right? What are your 3 greatest barriers to achieving a healthy weight? And this is personal, so you don't have to share it with me now, but I'd love for you to fill it in at some point, because a lot of times, if you don't know what that is, you might be doing everything else right, and you don't know your barrier. I'll tell you, I see a lot of one-on-one client consultations, and I'll tell you a lot of the barriers I see. Juice, huge barrier for people, and other sweetened drinks. They're doing so many things right, and that one thing is holding them back. Alcohol, huge barrier for people. They watch their food, and have a couple beers at the end of the month. And that's holding them back, or a couple glasses of wine. I have tons of people who work so hard in the gym and work so hard on their diet, and they have those few 200 and 300 calorie things that are holding them back. And they do add up. It could be your environment. It could be that every time you eat in front of the TV, or you eat without portioning it out on a plate first. So you eat healthy things, but you eat too much of them because you didn't pay attention to the portion. So think about those things that could be barriers for you. It could be that somebody you love is always making brownies and bringing them over to you, and then you can't resist, or that you let yourself get too hungry. I know I make really bad food choices when I get too hungry. If I'm not too hungry, I do pretty good. But if I get too hungry, I lose my mind and do something stupid. Okay, does anybody else do that ever? Never. Okay. It's like when you're riding through the grocery store and you just really want to just grab something off the counter and off the shelf and just open it up, and then you're like, no, I can't do that. That's when you're too hungry to go grocery shopping. Okay, if you ever feel like that, go back somewhere and eat before you go to the grocery store. That just sets you up for trouble. Okay, so that's a good review, and what we're doing today is we're talking about making our shopping time efficient. We're talking about how to do this for real. and not just using bars and shakes and all that, which isn't bad, but that only lasts so long. You can only afford that for so long if you're buying those, and you can only tolerate the same taste of something for so long. So I really like to teach people how to use the food to make it work for them. So that's what we're doing today. If you're not somebody who does cooking regularly, then this is a hard thing to get used to, but once you do, you can stay with it and it really becomes more easy. So we're going to give you lots of recipes today. Your packet is really thick today. We used a lot of paper for you today just because people kept asking over the years for actual recipes. And so these are all tried and true recipes from either myself or another dietitian. Her name is Kim. She does Eating Well with Kim through Doctors Hospital on Channel 12. So these are all our real recipes that we encourage that we actually use at home and try, so they're not, I don't ever like to try a recipe unless somebody I know has tried it, or at least it has 5 stars on all recipes by 200 people. You know, I don't want to try something out unless I know. Okay, so I want to make sure y'all know those are good options. Okay, so first, when you're preparing to shop, check newspaper ads for foods on sale and coupons, but be careful. Okay, when I first started trying to do coupons a few years ago, I was like, okay, a lot of my friends get super great deals in coupons. And you know what I realized after the end of it? I don't need Oreos. I don't need Lucky Charms. You know, all the things that the coupons were for were having me buy things I didn't ever buy before. And then I think, why did I do that? I saved 40 cents on something I wasn't going to spend $3 on yesterday. Okay, maybe that wasn't the best thing. So I'm not against coupons, and if you can do it well, go for it. But if most of the foods that are really, really healthy for you don't have coupons associated with them. Brown rice, sweet potatoes, grilled chicken breasts, salmon, most of them don't. Now I will say Earth Fare, if you get on their email list, they send you out really good coupons, like $5 off a bag of potatoes and things like that. So if you're not on their email list, you can get on their text list too. They do sell, give out coupons on real food. So be careful to not let ads draw you into sales of things that you weren't going to buy. Buying meat that's lean is really important to do it when it's on sale, even if it means you do it in bulk, because otherwise you may choose. Like if you're at a store and the chicken breast is $5.79 a pound, you might just go, never mind, I'll just go with the ground chuck because it's so much cheaper. But if you had last week bought a little extra of that, it's worth doing the bulk. How many of you guys buy lean meat in bulk and freeze it? Anybody? Sam's or Costco, or even buying it in bulk when it's on sale? It's really worth it because then you're not stuck. I even cook it in bulk. Like when I buy the chicken, I open up the whole grill, and my husband's not home yet, so I'm the grill master. It's really not, but I've gotten better at it. So I put all the meat from that whole package on the grill because if I'm doing the whole thing, I might as well do the whole thing. It'll take about 5 more minutes. And then I portion the strips into little freezer bags, and it only takes about 5 minutes. So that way, when I need them, I just pull them out in the morning, and then they're ready and defrosted by the evening, and they're cooked and ready and good. And then they don't have all the sodium and stuff that frozen dinners have because I made them myself. Okay, so if you are buying in bulk, sometimes you can go ahead and cook in bulk. Also, when I get like a pork loin, which is a big piece of meat, I cook it, the whole thing. I broil it usually, and the recipe that I love is in here. And we eat about 1/3 of it in our family, and then we thinly slice it and use it for deli meat. So instead of $8.99 for processed-free deli meat, it's $1.99, and I know what's in it. It's fresh garlic and cracked pepper and good stuff. And then you slice it thinly and zip it in a the zipper freezer bags, they're so handy. So you can use those at home for your own deli meat, and it's really good, and then it saves you lots of money and preservatives and things like that. So this seminar is chock full of ideas like that. Okay, keep a running grocery list on your refrigerator. Most people usually do that anyway, or somewhere handy. Investing time in planning menus. So that's what you have in your packet there, is 4 weeks of menus. And I don't expect that all of you are going to cook every day for 4 weeks, but if you wanted to, you have that option. There's one weekend day that there's not a recipe for, and these are for dinners, or lunches if you want to make it for lunches. There's one weekend day there's not, so if you go out to eat or if you want to have leftovers, you can plan it for a weekend, or you can move it up and swap one of the recipes in there. But what I do when I think about making recipes for the week, and these are a lot of the ones I use at home, I think, okay, supposed to try to get 2 to 3 fish servings in a week. How am I going to do that? Start with that. Because a lot of people say when I'm eating healthy, I'll use chicken. That's not the case at my house. We don't eat chicken 6 days a week. A lot of people think that's what you have to do to eat healthy, and it's not. So you start with the fish because it's the healthiest, and you look at the sales for the fish, and you buy that in bulk if you can. And then if you don't have more than 1 fish serving during the week, you try to have it left over somewhere, or even a tuna sandwich counts as a fish serving. And you try to get in those 2 to 3 servings that the American Heart Association urges us to get for lots of good reasons. Okay, and then you think, okay, what are my other lean meat or lean protein options? And it doesn't have to be meat for those who are vegans or vegetarians. There's plenty of other options that we'll talk about as we go along too. So what's another lean meat? Why don't y'all tell me? Turkey and chicken, both kind of in that next category. So you might put one each on the next menu, so then you've got up to 3 to 4 things. And then for me, I usually recommend people eat lean beef a maximum of once a week, and lean pork a maximum of once a week in terms of a dinner. And sometimes you can have a little bit of it left over or do one or the other. But 2 red meat portions a week is really plenty. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't even eat that much. And what they mean is, I don't eat steak that much. Because usually when they tell me that, and then we go through a week's recall, they're like, well, tacos on Monday. And I'm like, well, that is ground beef. Well, that's true. And then I had, and over the end of the week, they realized they had tacos and spaghetti and steak. And they thought they were only having meat when they had steak. So just keep in mind that all those do count towards it. And the leaner the beef and pork, the better. And the words that you're looking for are the words round and loin. And there are a couple other lean cuts, but those are the easy go-tos that you can remember. So if you see something that says chuck or Boston butt or all those porterhouse, those are not lean cuts. You can probably tell by looking at them, but not always. Then when you cook them and you get like this big thing of lotion in the bottom of your thing, you wonder how that got there, okay? That's because you got a fatty cut of meat and you don't want to do that. Or if you get a sandwich, and one time my husband got the sandwich and he's like, I didn't know what kind of meat that was, so I just thought, hopefully it was lean. And he's like, turns out it was a fat sandwich. I just remember that. He's like, I think I just ate a fat sandwich for lunch because I didn't taste hardly any meat, and I kept picking it off. And if you don't choose a lean cut of meat at a restaurant especially, you're probably going to get a fat sandwich. So be careful not to do that. But investing a little bit of time, then they can repeat. So let's say if you're an average person, you probably repeat the same set of food in your home every 5 to 10 days. People have Monday through Friday or Monday through Sunday, and then they repeat. Or they might have 2 weeks of that. So I've given you 4 weeks. So what you might want to do is try out the ones you think you'll like and condense it down to 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 1 week, whatever rotation that you'd like. Or you can mix in some of your own. And if you want a blank sheet like that, I do have those downloadable on my website in case you want those. So let me know if you decide to want one of those. But that way you can write it in or print it or type it however you like. Planning ahead limits the number of trips going to the supermarket, okay? I don't know about you, but I see people come in this shopping in the store just to go grab a gallon of milk, and that's not always all they get, okay? What other things kind of scream your name when you run in the store to grab one thing? Oreos, 2 for $4. I saw that at Kroger first thing when I walked in last night. I was a little too hungry. Okay, so that's another one. What about pizza? Okay, like the easy to throw in the oven right at the front. So a lot of things end up going in your cart instead of that just one thing. So if you can try to plan, it'll keep you from going in. I had this little rule for a while when my kids were really little, which they're still pretty little, but when they're really little, just going to the grocery store is not so fun with 3 little kids, right? So I thought, if I don't get it, I'm not going back. And I'm going to learn quick if I make a mistake. I'm not going more than once every 7 days. And it really helps to streamline your planning. If you put yourself in that position where you can't go back when you forget something, you get creative and you get disciplined in your planning. So that helps a little bit. And I'll give you some ideas as we go along, but a lot of you guys I know have been cooking for a long time and have a great routine, and maybe you just need a little bit of a change. Now some people say eating healthy is expensive. It is sometimes. It doesn't have to be. It depends. And if you're always getting mahi and salmon and things like that, that definitely costs more than ground chuck and things like that. But you can even get a lot of those on sale and weight. But in the big scheme, a lot of the people that I see are eating out a lot, so they can borrow from your eating out budget and put it into their cooking budget, and it even still goes lower, I think, than it would if you were eating out. So sometimes you have to borrow from your McDonald's budget or your Starbucks budget, or those other ones. Planning reduces costs because if you do plan, like I said, and you don't run to the grocery store every few days, you are going to buy less in general because those impulse buys are less likely to happen. You're going to spend less gas money. So if you think about it, it may cost a little more in the up front on some of the leaner meats and some of the fresh vegetables, but in the end it doesn't. And eating less than you were before, if that's helping you lose weight because you were eating too much, if that was you, then that costs less too. So that's good. Okay. So I wouldn't be as concerned about this. Medications cost money, and I've had a lot of people throughout the past 7 years of Team Lean come off medications, and so those co-pays drop, and then they can spend the money on healthy food. So it might cost a little bit more, but don't let that hold you back because sometimes it becomes an excuse. So be careful of that. If you don't plan ahead, you're more likely to pay out for tips and dining out and things like that at the last minute that you didn't plan to do too. So I'm really urging you to plan ahead, and I've made it really easy for you by putting it on your hand, so hopefully that'll help you a little bit. Okay, this is something, I really like this slide. Put a star by it, and when you get home, I want you to check these off. And I may have even put this in the first seminar, because I like this slide, because I want you to check your environment to make sure it's setting you up for to be healthy, okay? So I'm going to read through this one with you, and then some of the next slides I'll let you read on your own, because they have just some information and things I want to have in your pantry. All right, so if you answer yes to most of these, you may need a kitchen makeover. Are most of the items in your kitchen boxed or canned? Okay, if you might have a whole pantry like that, a whole cabinet full of those, that might be too many. Do the grains all come with a little seasoning packet? Okay, if every grain, if your grains are like this, that's one thing. But if they all come in a little box and you rip open, as you're ripping, I want you to feel that little angel on your shoulder like this. This is what she meant, okay? Because you can be assured that that's almost a whole thing of salt. It's like a whole table full of salt at a restaurant. And people pick on people for shaking salt, and I'm telling you, you get nothing from shaking the salt shaker compared to those prepackaged foods that have 800, 900 milligrams of sodium per half a cup serving, okay? So be careful of those. And it's not just the sodium. It's usually they're real processed anyway, so they're not the best foods for you. On the labels of your cereals and snacks are added sugars listed as one of the main ingredients. So when you're looking at your cereal, does it say whole wheat sugar as the second or third ingredient? So even if it's a whole wheat, you don't want sugar being the very second thing, because ingredients are based on weight. So if sugar is the very last ingredient, then it's very sparingly used in that recipe. So you want to try to look at that. Are many of your foods artificially flavored and colored? Do they all have little characters on the front and all that kind of fun stuff? Usually those indicate that there's some dye and things like that in there, which dye, as you saw on my first slide, isn't really holding most people back from losing weight, but usually food that has dye in it is sort of like the sodium. Sodium doesn't really make you gain weight unless you retain water from it, which in that case you have to retain water weight, not really fat weight. But the foods that all have that much sodium and dye in them are just not the foods that will contribute to you reaching your very best body that you want to get to routinely. Okay? Are there foods that make your fingers feel greasy or your lips feel slimy, like we talked about already? Do the list include hydrogenated oils, which is the same thing as trans fat? That is a fat that makes your cholesterol go bad. Your good cholesterol gets worse and your bad cholesterol gets worse. Okay, so you don't want to eat hydrogenated oils. Who knows what hydrogenated oils are found in? What are some foods that you might want to eliminate because of that? Margarine. A lot of snack food and baked foods, yeah, like kind of junk food category. Restaurant foods that are real, like the McDonald's fries, how they're like perfectly crispy and all that. It's usually because they have a lot of those in them. What else? Another one I've found is in store brand pretzels a lot of the times. I've not found them in the regular brand. Also in tortillas. Almost every tortilla is going to have saturated fat, hydrogenated oil in it. So be looking out for those. Usually on the label will say trans fat, but if it's 0.5 grams or more, they have to list it. And if it's 0.499 or less, they don't have to list it. But if you're eating a tortilla that has 0.4 and you eat 3 of them, because that's how you do it with your fajitas or whatever, it adds up a lot. And the goal for hydrogenated fat is 0. Okay? So if you're a peanut butter eater, if you eat it more than once a month, I would say go the natural peanut butter for sure. Because that's a hydrogenated oil that's going to make your heart health poor as it adds up over time. Okay? Are there tempting snacks or sweets in plain view? Now, I don't know if y'all are like me, but if it's in plain view, I want it, even if I'm not hungry. Is that sort of normal for a lot of people? Like if I had a big plate of chocolate chip cookies right here, all of a sudden I would be hungry even though I just had dinner. So that happens. Does anybody else like that? Y'all are really like Am I the only one that's weakened by chocolate? No. Okay. So don't want to be alone on that. But a lot of times having food in plain view. And so one of the exercises I'd like for you to do when you do this is if there is something right in your face in your plain view, and you know if you ever go to the grocery store, they put the most expensive things right in your eye level because they know that's what you're going to buy. Well, it's the same in your pantry and in your fridge. If you put the most tempting, dangerous, shouldn't eat them but once in a while foods right there in the front on your eye level, then that's going to cause you to eat them, even probably unintentionally when you didn't plan to. So move those to the back or maybe even move them out of your house if they're really not helping you. Okay, what about heavily processed or fatty meats like hot dogs, sausage, salami, or bologna? Okay, I call those fake meats. They're sort of in the non-meat category because if I can't really identify the part of the animal that they come from, then I don't really want to eat that. So if you are eating a lot of those are probably giving you way too much sodium chemicals, and a lot of times they're just not giving you that much good nutrition that you need. So try to go with the actual meats, like I was saying with the pork filling suggestion. And there are some that you can buy that have less preservatives and less junk in them than others. Is the salt the first ingredient in most of your spices and seasonings? A lot of people think that garlic salt and garlic powder are the same thing. Are they? One's salt with a little bit of garlic, one's garlic without salt. So they're not the same thing. So carefully look through your ingredients. So just take some time to peek through your pantry and see if it's helping you, see if it's setting you up for success. And then is your environment directing your mind to eating the food and enjoying it? Are you being mindful about the food that you have? Making the most of the time that you have to eat, or are you just kind of scarfing it down, reading the paper, watching the TV, whatever it is. So a lot of times if we put a little more focus on our food while we're eating it, we enjoy it a little bit more and it gives us more satisfaction, and we're less likely to eat too much of it. Okay, and then the opposite, if you answer yes to most of these, this is good. So if you go out of town and everything in your fridge dies and you have to come home and clean it, that's perfect. Okay? If you go out of town for 3 days and you don't have to clean out your fridge or anything, or you don't have to like try to eat everything up before you go, that concerns me, because then I think, okay, I know what's in their fridge. Cheese, salami, you know, just no fresh, real food, okay? Because that stuff goes bad. Do you have at least 3 rainbow, and cheese goes bad too, but not just not. If it's super processed, it takes longer to go bad. Do you have at least 3 rainbow colors of fresh fruit? So when you're in the grocery store, look in your cart and be like, how many colors are represented here? Do we have every color in the rainbow? Because every color represents a different nutrient for the most part that are helpful for your health. Do you have any beans without sodium? I found that's very hard to find. So I used to think this was really a big pain to soak the beans, but I figured out if you have a pressure cooker, then you can cook them really, really fast. Or if you have a crock pot, instead of soaking them overnight, you can just cook them overnight. And they sort of soak for the first several hours of the night, because if your crock pot's like mine, when you fill it all the way to the top with water, it takes forever to heat up. So really kind of by the next day, they're simmering and boiling, and then you have your beans soft, and you don't, cost 99 cents, and if you don't have any of that sodium added. Then you can add some within control, but usually canned beans are very, very high in sodium.
Yeah.
So be careful, and then you can buy them. Earth Fare has them. I haven't found another grocery store that has beans with no salt in them. I have found some with peas with no salt and tomatoes with no salt, but I have not found beans, dried beans with no salt. So they're hard to come by, so they might be worth doing some of the soaking. And I always get, like if I'm making black bean soup, I go ahead and make a big batch of it. So it makes it worth my time if I'm going to bother to soak it and do all that. And then I even freeze some. It makes it just really handy to do. And there is a black bean soup recipe in your recipes too. Okay, are your dressings low and reduced in fat, and are your cheeses low and reduced in fat, and your meats? Those are the 3 that matter. I'm not like a big fat-free everything person, but when it comes to meat, cheese, dairy, and dressings, those are the things that can clog your arteries potentially. So those are the ones I want you to do in the lower fat amount, and more moderate. Okay? Is there anything ready to serve in your freezer, like some of that soup left over, like I was talking about? So if you have to eat quickly, you don't have to run out or call for pizza. I feel like you have to do that. Okay, does anybody ever feel like they have to do that? You just have to? Some people are like, well, that's our only option. Pizza. Because we just don't have to. I'm like, occasionally you could eat a sandwich. You could even eat a peanut butter jelly sandwich at home sometimes if you didn't prepare. You don't have to have pizza as a backup all the time. Okay, is there a tidy table where you can eat mindfully and without distraction? And do you have whole grains? Here's some ideas for whole grains: brown rice, oats, whole grain bread or pita, whole grain crackers or crisp breads, whole grain cereal, or whole wheat pasta. So if you're doing gluten-free, they don't all have to be wheat-based. But I wanted to show you a couple of these because a lot of people don't know what quinoa is. It's not really a grain, but it cooks up like a grain, so we put it in that category. There are some recipes for this in your packet. There's a soup in there, and there's also a lettuce wrap that's really, really yummy. This by itself, not so super yummy, but you can mix it in with your brown rice. You can mix it into your oatmeal just to add a little more protein, a little diversity. Or you can mix it into a recipe like a soup or like your lettuce wraps like you're going to see. But it has a little more protein than the average grain, so it might hold you a little bit longer. But it's not, it's kind of gotten a lot of good reputation lately, but it's not magical. It's not like the perfect diet food necessarily. It just has a little more protein than the average grain. It is more expensive too, so keep that in mind. Beans are super great for you, and if you are going to do gluten-free or low processed, they are low processed if you don't get them from canned. Okay, most noodles you can get in the whole wheat variety. You can even get them in the brown rice variety. There's a recipe in there that's a Thai type recipe. And this is the noodle pack I use for it if you're looking for it. You won't find brown rice noodles with the other noodles typically in most grocery stores. So they will be either in the dietetic section that has a little gluten-free section, or they'll be with your Asian foods. And this, and I don't usually, as you'll see in the recipes, most of them don't have you open a packaged item. Most of them are just straight up food. But this one is already pre-made, and it goes really well with the recipe. And all you do is stir fry this while you're boiling this, and put a little of this on top, and then it's cooked after the day that you have the pork loin, and you add some sesame seeds with the pork loin. It's super duper yummy, inexpensive, super fast meal. And I really love it, but I needed to bring it in so that I knew you all heard me say this. This is not weight loss food right here, folks. Okay? So don't be like, the dietitian said I could have it. Okay? I need you to be sparing, and when the recipe says measure it, I need you to measure it. Okay? And it's not super low sodium either. Nothing from a bottle like this is. Very rarely. So I just wanted you to know that is a good option, but you just have to be moderate with it. And if you are doing the gluten-free diet and finding that it benefits you a lot, then these are a good option. They're again a little more expensive. Crisp breads I mentioned in the whole grains. A lot of people don't know what they are. My favorite is the sesame rye crisp. And there's Wassa and several brands too, and they're really good with something on them. Okay? Not so much like wheat thin where you just crunch it with nothing on them. They're really good with like tuna salad or light in mayo and things like that, but not so much by themselves unless you just really have a great palate for plain. That's why I like the sesame. So, and the last question is, if I stopped by right now, walked in your house, completely unannounced, everybody's like, don't do it, and I open your pantry and your fridge, would I be like, no wonder you're winning, Team Lean. You are so set up. Or would I say, no wonder we're having a problem here. And then would all your team be like, okay, we have a weak link on our team, okay? So don't let your house be the one that if I show up or somebody on your team, in fact, you guys should do this with your team this week. You should show up unannounced to the person who's the weak link and refresh their pantry. No, I'm sure nobody has a weak link, but just in case. And refresh their pantry and fridge with yummy things with lots of colors and whole grains and all that good stuff. Okay, so these are the slides that I told you I wouldn't be reading to you directly, but they give you some ideas of healthy foods. I did bring in a couple canned foods. These are pretty much the only canned foods that I have in my house, and canned green beans without salt. Because those are sort of a backup. Canned shouldn't be your main source. You want to do fresh and frozen as much as possible. But salmon is a good one to get canned sometimes, so you can make salmon croquets or salmon patties and different things like that. I like this a lot because it gives soup a fabulous flavor if you're doing different kinds of soups that are Southwestern or black bean soup and things like that. I use canned pumpkin to replace oil a lot in recipes, or butter or margarine or different things like that. You can do that with applesauce too, but this has less carb and more nutrients than the applesauce, and it does a similar thing in your muffins and things like that. So I keep some of these handy, so I just wanted you to have an idea. And some diced tomatoes, and Walmart and a couple other places have no added salt diced tomatoes. So just keep in mind to have a few things that are canned as a backup, like the canned green beans, I use those because they have no added salt, and I use those as a backup for if I don't have enough fresh veggies. But try to think fresh and plan ahead a little bit. And like I went to Sam's just a day or two ago, and I bought these beans. Yeah. And you know what it says? That it keeps, this says good until the 11th, and I bought it I think on the 2nd or 3rd. That's a nice long time. So if you intentionally plan at your when you're planning your food, try to eat the most perishable foods at the beginning of the week, then you can almost go 2 weeks without having to shop if you're really strategic, because a lot of these foods, this too, eat by the 9th, so you still have almost a whole week to get a lot of these things in. And I'm not saying you have to buy these. They are more expensive when you buy in the bag, but here's what I decided a long time ago. I'm not buying expensive chips. I'm not buying expensive Cokes. I don't mind spending an extra $1 on 15 different vegetables that are pre-chopped, so I don't have to. Okay? I don't mind peeling my carrots, but I'm probably not going to buy a bag of kale and a bag of, and a thing of, I'm not going to do that necessarily. So some of these are very worth it, and when they're on sale, definitely go take advantage of them and grab them. And Sam's and Costco possibly too have these bag chopped salads. They have lots of good like celery and things in them that you might not buy all these different ingredients to mix together. But I need to warn you, the dressings are never light. Okay? And you need to just be very sparing with them when you have these. But they're very handy. When we do this, there's a Southwestern one that's so good. We put just a Freeze some of your black beans when you prepare them in the crock pot if you do it that way. And then just put a cup of black beans in there with the salad and add some grilled chicken strips that you froze from the grill the other day. And if you need a 5-minute dinner, you have it. Just be careful with the dressings. Because remember which food group that we mentioned before, which calorie was the highest? Which was the highest fat. So it adds up. So you can eat all this healthy salad stuff, and you can dump a lot of stuff on it that makes it all of a sudden not as healthy as it was. So be careful. Okay, so most of these are just for you to look at. This was adapted from the American Cancer Society's shopping list page. So there's several, and those are just for you to read and just go back through your pantry. Okay? So healthy snacks, we talked a little bit about snacks at the beginning. They keep us from getting in a bind where we eat too much of something we didn't need. So you want to try to plan those in. If you are very tempted to eat them, then you might not want to have them right in your office or right in your car. You may want to put them in your trunk or in the fridge down the hall at the office, or if you work from home or around there, you may not want to have things out on your counter where they're so central. But it is good to have those foods so that you don't get yourself stuck when you're hungry. And it really is, just so you know, it's really scientific for you to do that, for you to eat things that you wouldn't have otherwise. Because there's only one thing that can fuel your brain, and it's sugar. And it's sugar broken down from healthy things. I don't mean straight up like candy bars. But when your blood sugar drops, then you have no more sugar fueling your brain, and you can't think as straight to make good choices, and that's part of why you make poor choices. So it's not just an excuse. You want to set yourself up for success so that you don't have that major drop. So when you're starting to notice yourself, all of a sudden at 3 o'clock you want something sweet, or all of a sudden at 10 o'clock you want something salty. If you're noticing that about you, it might be because you either need to go to bed, or you need to have a snack plan, depending on the time of the day. You probably don't need to go to bed at 3. Boss might not like that. So you can read over that just to give you some good ideas if you have freezer space at work and different things that you can have besides always just grabbing a 100-calorie pack of this or that. Again, those aren't bad, but they don't set you up with good nutrition to hold you over, to help you exercise a good workout. If you guys ever try to work out when you're not eating well, have y'all tried that? Like really reducing your calories for the sake of team lean, and then you go to the gym and the treadmill's about to kick you off the back, and you're in the class and people are kickboxing and they're about to knock you over because you just haven't fueled yourself well. So you don't want to go too light or too long without food so that you can't exercise. Okay, and then in cooking tips, like I told you, I'm not big on making everything fat-free because you need fat at every time that you eat to help you hold it over. But there are a lot of recipes that have more fat in than they need because they've already got the fat from eggs, and they already have the fat from sometimes nuts and oils and then butters and different things like that. So that's where the pumpkin and some of these other things come into play to reduce the fat in your recipe. If it's macaroni and cheese or a creamy casserole, you can just bet that it has too much fat. And even if you get the reduced fat cream of mushroom soup and all those things, it's still going to be pushing the high end. So just be careful on creamy things like creamy soups, creamy casseroles, desserts that are creamy and all those sorts of things. But do take the strong spices that makes something taste good, like pancakes. Let's say you're trying to eat whole wheat pancakes and you're not used to that. So you add a bunch of cinnamon and you slice up apples and cook them on the stove with cinnamon in them, and they're so good, and then you add that to the top, and then you don't miss the Bisquick as much because you're using the whole wheat option. Okay? So try to set yourself up to not be like, see, I knew I'd hate that. You know, let's not do that, okay? Like if you don't really love omelets, but you're trying to make one, but you love peppers and onions, and you can chop all that up in there and it makes your omelet good, then go for that. Don't just say, well, I knew I'd hate egg whites, you know, and just eat egg whites plain. You know, you want to set yourself up to enjoy things by putting some of those really good, flavorful foods in there without so many calories. All right, and try to prepare foods without salt and fatback type seasoning and all those things. The bouillon cube does have a lot of sodium too, so you still want to be sparing with that. Again, trying to use fresh herbs or spices or veggies and things to help flavor things rather than just salt. Because sometimes your food just tastes like salt and that's all you recognize. Because it masks the taste of good food, so you might not even know what good food tastes like if you salt it so much. Okay, remember that if you have a meal with beans, eggs, or cheese, you don't necessarily need another protein in it, depending on the combination of food. So if you're having like black bean soup, what I always do as the protein to add to the bean protein is instead of using sour cream, I use plain Greek yogurt because it has a lot more protein, but it tastes the same in your soup. So that's a good way to take a meatless meal and bump up the protein to the amount of the meat meal. And I strongly suggest that if you're doing soups that are bean-based, because otherwise you don't fill up that much unless you eat a bunch of them. So you may want to add some of that higher protein Greek yogurt. Okay, and increasing your veggies intake anytime you can. So like tonight at my house, we made spaghetti, because I knew I'd be here, so I was doing something quick, and I made this, and I took a whole bag of the baby spinach, just like 3 times the size of this. And as soon as I finished boiling the noodles, I turned the noodles off and put all that fresh spinach in there. Put the lid on for about a minute, it all wilts. It doesn't get real spinachy because I don't like overcooked spinach. It just wilts, and then I strain it and put the sauce and everything in it. And so I got a whole big bag of spinach in everybody's food, and they won't hardly notice, and you just chop it up and throw it in there. Okay, and you don't even have to chop it up if you like spinach, you can get some good chunks of it. But it doesn't turn your whole, it's not like, you'll be amazed how much the spinach disappears when it gets hot. If you've ever cooked spinach, you see how it disappears. So that's giving you some extra nutrients and a good way to get those veggies in. So put them in whenever you can. And my favorite thing to use is broccoli slaw, and I didn't have any to bring for y'all, but it comes in a bag just about like this, and it has carrots, cauliflower, broccoli, and it's all chopped up real fine. And if you don't like any of the foods I just named, you probably will still like it because it doesn't have a strong flavor. And you can chop it up, and I steam it, put it in spaghetti sauce, steam it, put it in lasagna, puree it, put it in soup. Just use it for all sorts of stuff. And it keeps for about 2 weeks in your fridge almost. So I also like to serve it with chopped up Granny Smith apples, which is really good, like a quick salad that you pulse in your, it's in your recipes too. It's called the rainbow salad. You pulse it in your food processor. Okay, so just wherever you can throw veggies in, that's going to help fill you up. And again, fiber helps fill you up, okay? So you really want to look for foods high in fiber. Rich in fiber foods have 3 grams or more per serving. And then what did I tell you about grains? A serving of a grain is half a cup. Does that mean you can only have a half a cup a day? What about, does that mean you can only have a half a cup a meal? You can even have more than a half a cup a meal, depending on the meal. Most people need their grains more at the breakfast, and then maybe even at lunch, and then taper it off towards the end of the day with maybe just 1 grain or starch at dinner. Or 2 if you're more active or have more lean mass, like we talked about the first week. All right, and then everybody wants to ask margarine versus butter. Both are fat, so you should be moderate. But I do like the Smart Balance Light spread. I think that's a good one, especially the Omega, the Smart Balance Light Omega, if you're looking for an alternative to butter. I like the Smart Balance 50/50 that has butter flavor in it too, because it goes a long, long way. Last night I made this. You cut the edge and you put it in the microwave for 4 minutes. And while I was doing that, I put 1 teaspoon for five people of butter, 1 teaspoon of the 50/50 butter in the frying pan, and just cooked up some cashews, just broken up cashews. And then as soon as it got out of the microwave, just tore it up and stirred it in there. So every piece had like a teeny touch of butter and a little piece of cashew with it. And it is so good. And that's not one of your recipes, but I just told it to you. It's that easy. And so the whole dinner just takes a minute, but it's really, really good. And it's one of the few places about butter it goes a long, long way. So you don't have to put a big scoop of it. Literally measure it out so that it's a teaspoon and not a lot, because those cashews have the fat that you need for the meal too. So there's lots of good things you can do like that. Because if you don't like green beans and you've only ever had canned green beans, then you don't like green beans because you've never tasted green beans. Okay, you got to try them in some different recipes. And remember, when you're eating desserts, try to use fruit as your dessert as much as possible, even if you have to change it up a little bit. But don't change it up too much. Like, I don't mean like a full-out cobbler with ice cream on top and call that a fruit. You got to be careful of that. You can eat frozen fruit. Frozen raspberries are really good. Really good. You can buy a big bag of them. Frozen mangoes are really good. You might be surprised. They might feel kind of like a candy, like a treat for you. So try some of those if you need something different besides dessert. This again is for you to read on your own, but it just gives you some recipe modifications. If you're trying to use less fat or use less of something, it gives you some ideas of how to do that. So you can look at that one on your own. Okay. We can tell you guys are getting sleepy on this cold, rainy winter night, so we're going to leap instead of raising our hands like we did 2 weeks ago, and I can tell y'all are in the mood. Okay. So jump out of your chair. Oh my gosh, come on. Jump out of your chair if you always shop with a grocery list. Whee! Yeah, that way. Okay. Make a menu for the week. Jump out of your chair if you always make a menu for the week. One person, let's give her a round of applause. Okay, jump out of your chair if you have learned that eating out has caused you weight gain. Or maybe your friends if you don't want to say weight gain. I put that one in there just as we burn a calorie in there. How many of you keep your grocery trips just to 1 or 2 times a week? And if you can do a beautiful grocery trip 3 times a week, you go ahead. But most people end up buying more stuff than they need. Very good. How many of you buy extra lean meat when it's on sale and freeze it for later? Anybody? Come on, burn a calorie or 2. How about how many of you plan ahead about how to use use part of tonight's dinner or an ingredient that you're preparing tonight, tomorrow, or later in the week. That takes a little thinking. Very good. Very good. And I want you to know, in your packet there that has all the meals for the weeks, if you'll see there's a column that says planning. And in the first week I did a lot of the planning for you and I wrote it in. And the second and third and fourth I did less and less and less because I want you to start doing that. But you'll see that I intentionally put something here that can be used later. And I said, while you've got your cutting board out, think about what you can chop for tomorrow. While you've got chicken here, then think about freezing it or cooking it. So it gives you ideas, and as the weeks go on, I want you to write those ideas in so you'll get better and better at that. Okay, how many of you use like a disposable Tupperware type container or a Ziploc bag to freeze what you can't finish or to double? It doesn't have to be something fancy. Very good, those help. We even have those in our giveaways today. I love these ones because they're exactly a half a cup, so they're pre-measured. So if you want to take them to work, you know how much you have. Thank you, Janet. Good job. How many of you use convenience foods like the bagged salad mix or the grilled chicken strips or pre-cut fruit sometimes? And don't feel like you have to. Very, very good. Don't feel like you have to because it is more expensive. So if you can take the time, then go ahead. But if you need to borrow from your junk food budget, go ahead and do that too, to buy some of those extras that are making it easier for you. All right, what if you prepare ingredients for tomorrow's meals today while the kitchen's already a mess? We had one that was sort of like that already. I won't even make you get up. I can tell you that. How many of you double a recipe and freeze half of it? Oh my gosh, this is what I'm getting. Seriously? Thank you. You guys can burn a calorie. Come on. How about keeping portions healthy snacks at work or in your car or already ready in your fridge? Portions all ready for you. Who does that? That sets you up really well. If you know it's a tempting food, go ahead and put it in one of those little things you snack on top so you know exactly how much of it you're having. Have a modified recipe. How many of you have modified a recipe before to make it more healthy? Hopefully you tried that in the past few weeks. Didn't work out? Okay. Well, you've got a chart in there. Maybe it will help you. And how many of you use a measuring cup or a ladle when you're serving your food right onto your plate so that you know? That is very, very smart, all three of you. That is very smart. Because then, while you're serving it onto your plate, you actually know what you're really having instead of saying, especially if you're recording your food. People tell me, yeah, I'm doing my fitness pal. I'm like, oh, you're measuring too? No. I'm like, well, how do you know? You're just telling it that you had a half a cup and you're hoping you're right. But you have to measure it sometimes to find out. So if you haven't done that, like I said at the beginning, take some time to measure and do that. And then the rest of this is coordinated with your menu plan handout. So you have front and back, 4 menus for 4 weeks. And then in order, all the recipes are in your packet, in the back of the PowerPoint. And they have an asterisk beside them if the recipe's included. And do know if there's 2 recipes on one day, personally, a lot of times I just do one. And I'll do something easy like steam some broccoli for the other one. So if you don't have time to make the fancy salad in there's lots of fancy salads in there just to make you realize that you don't always have to have plain old salad. But just so you know, there's lots of options. You can pick one and then do something similar to the other one that's more simple if you need to. But it just gives you lots of options from simple to a little more challenging. But most all of them are inexpensive and cooked in less than 30 minutes, most all of them. So hopefully you can find some of those that you enjoy. And thank y'all so much for your time tonight. I'll stay after for a few minutes of questions, and we're also going to do a quick raffle.